Hey everyone, this is Matt Perez, and welcome to video 3 in our SOLIDWORKS API Project Tracker series. In the last video, we took care of accessing custom properties in our file. We were able to get the project name and the project number custom property. Now, since we're on the topic of custom properties, we need to be able to create some sort of conditional statement, some sort of test to figure out if we have a custom property in the file. If not, then we need to be able to add the custom property. Let's go back to our program and just take a look at what we have. So currently we have our custom property manager getting access to all the custom properties in our file. Then we're using the call get5 to access project name and project number. Now we take these values and we populate the declared strings project number and project name. Now, with these declared variables, we then outputted both of those with a message box to SOLIDWORKS. So now we know that we're actually getting access to those values, and when we output them, we know that they're correct. So now we need to handle adding custom properties, but we also need to handle the functionality dealing with whether or not this value exists. So if we go back to our API help file and we take another look at our example, we have to remember that with get5, we have a return value, and this return value, if it's 1, is telling us that this value does not exist. We also want to take a look at this add3. Now, in this line of code here in our VBA example, it is taking this custom property mgr and add3, and it's adding the property a date. Then this line is getting the property, and then this line is resetting that value to a new value. So we're very interested in returning the value of get5, but we're also interested in add3. So first, let's handle returning the value to get5. So if we go back to get5 method, we notice that the return value, based on these enumerations, if it is return value equal to 1, the custom property does not exist. So we want to redeclare a return value, and if we look at the usage, value is declared as an integer. So in our program, I want to make some new declarations at the top. So I'm going to declare number ret val, and this is number return value, as long, and I'm going to declare name ret val as long. Now these two values are going to be what we set equal to. So we're going to have to go back here. We're going to have to make a few changes. In this case, we're dealing with project number, so we're going to use number ret val equal to the custom property, but because we're now returning a value, we have to go back and we need to finish this off by enclosing it. Then we want to come and do the same thing to project name. In this case, it's going to be name ret val is equal to, and again, we need to come in here and we need to close this off. Because whenever you're returning a value, you need to have the statements actually enclosed in your parentheses. So now we have a name return value and a number return value. Now what we want to do is figure out what these are equal to. So we're going to have another message box. I'm just going to do MSG box, and I'm going to return number ret val and some spaces and name ret val. So I want to return these two values so that way we know how we can work with them in the project. We can also, as opposed to doing a message box, we can also put in a stop in our code, and as we're running our code, we can see what's going on. So if we play through the code, you can see that it's stopping at this point. When we hover the cursor over, you see that number ret val is equal to 2 and name ret val is equal to 2. If we go back to our API help file and back to the enumeration, you see that 2 equals resolved, a value was returned. So now we know that a value of 2 means that we're actually getting a return value. I'm going to hit F5 to play through the rest of the program, and it's outputting the 2 in each instance. Then it's going to output the project number and the project name. Alright, so now we know that we're actually getting a return value. What happens if these properties don't exist? Let's go ahead and let's just start a new file, a new part file, and in this part file, we don't have any custom properties. So the program, now this is our part 7 is our active document, and the program is going to be looking for the custom property, project number, and project name. So if we play through this, we're outputting a 1 for project number and project name. So in our enumerations list, this means that the custom property rather does not exist. So back in the enumerations, you see that a 1 signifies that it's not present or it doesn't exist. So now in our code, we know that if we want to handle some sort of if-else statement, some conditional statement, we know that if these values, number ret val and number or name ret val, equal a 1, that means these properties don't exist. Then we can go into adding our custom properties. But for this point in time, let's go ahead and let's just remove these message boxes. And since we know that the current active document does not contain these properties, I want to go ahead and I want to use that add 3 in order to add that functionality. So back in the API help file, I'm going to just type in add 3. And you'll notice that add 3 is part of iCustom Property Manager, which we have access to. Adds a custom property to a configuration or model document. All right, so we see here in the Visual Basic Usage section, value equals instance dot add 3. Then they have field name, field type, field value, and overwrite existing. So if we take a look at these values, field name is the name of the custom property, field type is the type of custom property as defined in this enumeration. In our case, we're going to be using custom info text. You also can see that we have yes or no, number, double, date. These are all drop-down options when you're adding a custom property in SOLIDWORKS. We also have the field value, which is the value of the custom property. In our case, it's going to be project number or project name. Now, of course, later on, we're going to have to get a user input for these values. But for right now, we're going to manually enter them into our formulas and our code so that way we know that the functionality is working. Then we have an overwrite existing. If we take a look at the enumerations for that, you can see that we can replace value only if new. So this adds the custom property only if it's new. And then we have delete and add. Delete existing custom property having the same name and add the new custom property. So there are a few options and things that we need to handle. In our case, I'm going to handle the custom property only if new enumeration for that instance. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at value, which is defined as a system integer, and instance, which is defined as our iCustom Property Manager interface object. So back in our program, we want to go ahead and we want to use the add 3 option. So we're going to do custom prop mgr, which was in our case, if we relate that back to our API help file, that was our instance. So back in our program, custom prop manager, in this case, we're going to do dot add 3. And for add 3, we need to go ahead and add project number. So we'll deal with project number first. And this is where we need the field type. And this is where our enumerations come in handy. Now with SOLIDWORKS enumerations, you can simply have the number. So for instance, if we wanted to use text, we could put the number 30 in there. But when you're looking back through your code, that 30 isn't going to mean anything to you. Even if you've done this a million times, you're going to think to yourself, what does 30 mean? You're going to have to come back into the help file, figure it out. It's just easier to copy and paste the enumerations directly from the help file. Field value as string. Now, of course, I mentioned that at some point in time, we're going to have the user input a value for the project number. But for right now, we're just going to enter a couple ones. And then overwrite existing as long. Again, this was another enumeration. And of course, when you're working with dual monitors or multiple monitors, it's much easier to go back and forth. We want to use the SW custom property only if new. So back in our program, we're going to use the only if new. Now that should be the last of what this needs. Now it also can return a value, but in our case, we're not returning anything because we really don't care if this works or not. We could add that functionality. If we go back to the help file, you see that there is a return value, and you can see that added or changed, generic fail, mismatch against existing type, mismatch against specified type. So there are some options here for return value, which is going to be 0 to 3, and then we could be able to use that or handle it in some sort of functionality. But for us, we're really just going to add that, and we will know based on our user form later on down the road whether or not this actually worked. We don't need to have that return value. So I'm going to take this entire line of code and I'm going to copy it. And the reason I'm going to copy it is because I want to add it again, but instead of project number, I'm going to do project name. And this saves me a little bit of typing here. And of course, I'm going to change the one, and I'm going to change this to MLC. So now these two lines of code should add the custom property, project number, and project name. Let's go ahead and save this. Let's just double check our SOLIDWORKS file that part 7 is our active document. Part 7 does not currently have any custom properties. So if we run this file, if we play through it, it doesn't look like anything happens, but really that's because we took out those message boxes. So when it runs through this, there's no reason for it to tell us that it did anything. If we go back to SOLIDWORKS, back to our custom properties, we now see that we have project number, project name, and these are the values that we entered in that specific line of code. We put in quotations 11111, and we put in MLC for the project name. So now in our code, we know that we have the functionality to not only get the custom properties using this get5 option, we can also return a value, and we saw that we did a message box that returned a value 2 if this worked fine, if it actually was able to retrieve this, and we know it returned the value 1 if this was not in the current part file or drawing file or assembly file. And then we used custom prop manager.add3 to add the values project number, project name, and then the specific values that went along with them. So it took a little bit of workaround, and there's still really not much code here, but we're going to have to add quite a bit more because we're going to have to handle the return values and how to work with that and so on. But for right now, everything looks pretty straightforward. We're able to access custom properties. We were able to add custom properties, and this is a great start for our project time tracker because this is going to be the basis of everything. Whether or not this functionality works is going to be key to the rest of the program. So we're already about 13 minutes into this video. I think that's a good place to end it. In the next video, we're going to pick up where we left off and deal with these return values. We're going to work on whether or not these return values equal 1, and then we can go about adding these custom properties and so on. So if you guys have any questions, please email us at solidworksupport@mlc-cad.com, and we'll see you next time.